Marble powder and corrugated cardboard go well together. How to do it, I'll show you in this video. I have cut an exactly identical piece of corrugated cardboard for my 50x70 cm canvas, so I can best see the proportions of the figure that I want to take out now. With a felt tip pen, I now roughly sketch the figure. It doesn't have to fit in the first throw. You can still correct it a little so that it doesn't run parallel and doesn't appear symmetrical, but very organic. When the final figure is in place, I don't cut it out with scissors, but instead I take a pipette filled with water and walk along the edges. You can also do the same thing with a brush that's well dampened and then lightly brush along these edges. It's just a little easier with a pipette. And then you can tear off the piece you need along that waterline. The corrugated cardboard is then glued on with normal acrylic binder. I've put this piece in position and now I'm starting to paint the canvas from below, then glue this first part on, and now very important, you also go over the corrugated cardboard with the acrylic binder, so that it is sealed, and for the next paint application is well prepared. Then you work your way up piece by piece. After half a day, it is completely dry, and now comes the first application of paint. I'm going from top to bottom with acrylic paint in white over the corrugated cardboard and then added black accents to the damp white paint. That is, it becomes a gray in some areas, and the further down I go, the darker it becomes. I've already mixed together 600 grams of marble powder and 400 grams of acrylic binder here. I now start with the first order directly on the edge of the corrugated cardboard and stay in this area for the time being, so don't go all the way to the right to the edge of the canvas, but first see that I have filled this area well down to the end of the corrugated cardboard. You have to go over the corrugated cardboard, it has to be covered, and it is definitely a bit thicker here over the corrugated cardboard than it will later become the edge. Then the area is filled up to the edge with marble powder, but this is much thinner than it is directly with the corrugated cardboard, so that this area will not break as strongly as it then happens directly in contact with the corrugated cardboard. The other side, of course, also receives marble powder, and this is what the work looks like at the end of this work step. After 2 days, great cracks appeared and we can now start applying the paint. This paint application consists only of Payne's Gray, which I have thinned very heavily so that I get a very fluid paint that can easily bring into these depressions. So that the paint flows well, I now spray the whole picture lightly with water and then I can start. So that the great structures of the marble powder really come into their own, you have to make sure that enough paint runs into the gaps when the paint is applied. That's why I'm staying on the edge for now, not even bothering about the corrugated cardboard, which will only be added later. But now see that I create a good covering layer here, and you see, I keep rubbing with the brush so that it penetrates the depressions, so that they no longer flash white but become dark. So that the paint flows well on the corrugated cardboard, spray the area again and then the paint continues here. I simply paint the area in the direction of the corrugated cardboard from top to bottom and make sure that a layer of paint is created everywhere. And before I paint the rest of the picture, I go over it again with the spray bottle so that the surface is well wetted and the paint can flow properly. The entire picture is still wet from the paint, and I am now removing a bit of the paint. That is, I have a very wet brush and go over it, right now in the area of the corrugated cardboard, and take away paint here to lighten the whole thing in some places. In order to emphasize the structures even better, I now use kitchen paper to remove some of the color from the upper areas of the marble flower, so that the darker structures come into their own. If you liked this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell. In order to then emphasize the wave character of the two marble powder structures even better, I will now darken the remaining darker areas with a little color and thus intensify it even more. The layer with the liquid paint has to dry for a day. Then we can add the last effect by simply using white to emphasize the lighter areas and the edge of the corrugated cardboard. I have a roll here and white acrylic paint. I take very little use of this roll. It is best to try it on newsprint, not that you suddenly have a stain on the picture. Then you start to roll very slowly without applying pressure. We don't roll a wall, but now we just carefully take on these raised structures. The material takes the color off the roll by itself. The paint applied with the roller is dry after an hour, and you can paint. I use a glossy acrylic varnish here. Glossy works very well on a slightly darker surface, and I dilute the varnish with water. I try this out with the brush that it is not too thin. That's a bit of tact, but it's not half of the water that you need less. Nevertheless, it has to be thin, otherwise it will not penetrate the depressions. I apply the varnish very thickly in a first layer so that all the recesses are filled with varnish. Then I use a dry bristle brush to uncover the indentations so that they are also visible and have not been washed away by the paint.